Betrayed at home, humiliated beyond belief, and my ridiculous revenge only made it worse. Hello, my name is James. I'm 48 years old. I live in a small town just outside of Nottingham, where I've worked as a warehouse shift manager for over 20 years. I was married to Emma for nearly 2 decades. Well, that's what I thought. We had a mortgage on our modest semi, and the car was in my name, the flat was hers. I suppose those details mattered more than I realized at the time. It was our anniversary. I had been meant to be away on a business trip, but the delivery truck broke down, and the shift was cancelled. I decided not to tell Emma and came home early instead, picking up a bunch of yellow tulips on the way, the ones she liked. I let myself in as usual, quietly jingling my keys. But when I stepped inside, everything felt off. Slippers were by the door, but they weren't mine. They were bigger, clunky men's slippers. I heard the coffee machine buzzing in the kitchen. We didn't own a coffee machine. My heart skipped. Then, just as I was stepping into the hallway, a man came out of the bedroom wearing my dressing gown, looking as if he belonged there. He adjusted the collar like it was his own, then shot me a glance that felt like I was a delivery man who'd come to the wrong address. "Who are you?" I asked, voice barely steady. He looked right back at me, with the kind of indifference that stings worse than anger. "And you?" He replied. I set down the flowers silently, forcing myself to breathe before swinging a fist that barely landed squarely on his jaw. He didn't go down, just staggered and steadied himself against the wall. Emma burst into the hallway, wearing my shirt, shouting, "James, you're mad. He's just a friend." I turned away, walked to the kitchen, switched off the coffee machine, pulled the plug from the socket, then spun back around and punched him again. The vase on the side cracked and spilled water across the floor. Emma rushed between us, and I pushed her back hard enough that she hit the countertop with her shoulder. The silence that fell was heavier than any words. Only the water dripped relentlessly. I grabbed the tulips, crushed them, and flung them to the floor. "In 3 days, you'll get your summons." "Prepare yourself," he asked, confused. "Summons for what?" "For child support you won't get, and everything else I can take." Emma tried to step forward, but I looked her down and she froze. Without shutting the door behind me, I left. Outside, rain was falling, cold and steady. I sat in the car, hazard lights blinking, just staring ahead. 20 minutes later, my son called. "Dad, where are you?" "Far away for now. I'll be back soon." He was 15. He thought his mother was perfect that I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to my brother's place. He lived just a few stops away. I slumped on the floor of his living room until nightfall. Neither of us spoke. Then I told him I'd handle this quietly, but in a way she'd regret. He nodded. He'd worked at a bank once and still had connections. "I can help," he said. "Not with my hands, papers, networks, money." Contacts. 2 days later, I returned to an empty house. Emma was alone, cleaning. The flowers were gone, the place spotless. "This isn't what you think," she said. I cut her off, sliding a thick folder across the table. "A full list of accounts, debts, and everything registered in my name. I want a full breakdown tomorrow. Copy it onto a flash drive." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "Anything you say can and will be used against you. I'm not joking." That night I started my plan. I removed her from bank accounts, stopped direct debits, blocked her card, redirected mail, and set up a voice recorder hidden in the living room. She had no idea. Every complaint, every hissed accusation, every manipulation attempt was recorded. One evening, the man came again. I waited on the landing, heard the doorbell. When I opened, he stood there with a bag, my shirt poking out. "Just here to get my things," he said. I stepped toward him and he backed off, then fled. The shirt dropped on the wet floor. I picked it up, bagged it, and tossed it down the rubbish chute. Back inside, I sat opposite Emma. "You gave me lies for our anniversary. I'll give you everything else." The next day, I didn't wake her but cranked a drill into the walls until 7 in the morning. The noise buzzed like a swarm of angry bees. Emma ran out of the bedroom in my dressing gown, clutching her ears, screaming something I didn't listen to. I had a list to keep by 7 o'clock. I was queuing at the council offices for family composition certificates, change of registration forms. I wasn't interested in the flat itself. I knew how she'd got it. Forged valuations, fake gift contracts, forged receipts. Everything checked through a friend at the court that I wanted her out of the house, without her things, without warning. Later that day, I passed her standing barefoot in the hallway, phone pressed to her ear. She froze when she saw me but said nothing. That I snatched a folder from the cupboard. Contracts, receipts, screenshots of transfers. Everything she'd hidden. You have no right, she screamed. You haven't had a conscience for 19 years, I said. Balance restored. By noon, I was with a lawyer. Her bookkeeping was full of holes. Under-the-table payments, cash jobs, phantom bonuses. If I pressed, she'd lose everything. We planned to file for divorce in a different district, using a fake address to keep her from reacting in time. The judge was already on our side. Not a bribe, just a contact. On the fourth day he came back, not alone but with a friend. Maybe two would be brave enough. I met them outside, silent. He said, "We're not here to fight." I punched him in the throat. He gasped, knelt down. The friend stepped between us but didn't intervene. I looked him dead in the eye. You're next. They left like rats. The neighbor called the police. I waited calmly, showed the recording from the intercom. They're shouting, banging, threats. I filed a counter-complaint for threats and trespassing. On the fifth day, she got her summons. Pale, clutching the paper in the hall. "This is just the start," I said. She stopped going to work, called friends, played the victim. I listened. The recorder still under the table. I in broad daylight. She screamed at our son for leaving the light on. I entered quietly, stood in the doorway. She stopped. "You're taking it out on the child because you're losing. Hold tight, Emma." Closer to the floor. I packed her laptop, documents, flash drives, and took them to my brother. An IT guy. He dumped everything. Texts with the lover, photos, hidden folders. One photo was taken inside the car, our street visible in the background. I printed it and left it on her pillow. Under glass, a note read, "The courtyard lights come on at 10:15. You forgot." That evening, she cried in the bathroom. I blasted loud music. Old punk bands she hated. On the sixth day, I transferred the car's ownership to my brother. Legally a gift, but he signed a lease with me immediately. Let her try to take it. I left no holes. Everything in my name was gone. What was hers became worthless. Loans, debts. I proved some expenses were for her lover, gifts, gadgets, holidays. The bank flagged suspicious activity. One call, and her app was blocked. Late that night, she sat in darkness. "You're destroying me," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm creating a void." The destruction comes later. On the seventh day, I anonymously emailed her colleagues and family in accounting with that photo of her kissing him in my dressing gown. Subject, joint audit. Please verify expenses. Within 3 hours, she called, hysterical. The phone buzzed like an ambulance. I didn't pick up. Minutes later, she showed up at the door, whispering, "You're killing me. What do you want?" I stepped close. Watch the bathroom light. 3 flickers mean hide. He's already near. On the 8th day, she tried to end it. Half a bottle of pills, cheap wine, open window. I came home too early. She lay on the floor, face pressed to the heater, mumbling about unbearable pain. I called an ambulance, not out of pity, but because she was part of my plan. Alive, she would suffer longer. Doctors took her away. I stayed, gathering documents, medical cards, tests, bank cards, anything she might lose. I knew she had ulcers from stress and hated 4 drips. I didn't enter the ward. I left one instruction. Sign a voluntary confession of infidelity, or I'd include her medical records in my petition for incapacity. Who'd be her guardian? Me. While she was in hospital, I went to her office. I took off my jacket, stayed in a vest at a tea reception. I said I was her husband, bringing chargers and meds. The secretary took me to her desk. A young woman sat there, lost, who triggered the alarm. I said calmly, "Relax, it's not a threat. It's a notification. Your accountant has been falsifying reports. Copies with digital footprints are already with the authorities." I left without looking back. Back home, I changed the locks. The kids stayed with my mother. The house was empty, cold as a freezer. I went room to room, gathering her things. Robes, brushes, packed them into bags. In the cellar, I cut a hole in a wall the builders left open and sealed everything in. She would never see her past again. 2 days later, she was discharged. She came home in the same sweater she'd once greeted me in after work. She sat slumped by the wall. Deflated papers are on the kitchen table. I said. They show who you called, where you were, how much you spent. Sign them and I'll stop, and if I don't. I wordlessly placed a photo of her lover queuing to hand in his resignation. He tried to pressure me through a police contact. Claiming I was stalking and threatening him. Within an hour, his officer received footage of him running around the yard, shouting madly, banging on my door with a knife. The house cameras caught it all that I filed a counterclaim for attempted assault and witness intimidation. His texts with her, plotting to flee to Brighton until the dust settled, surfaced. He was quietly fired without compensation. That I learned he'd taken microloans and had his car impounded mid-game. But the stakes were rising. One evening, I came home to find the door open. No sign of forced entry or noise. That I crept inside. The bedroom light was on. That a note lay on the pillow in her handwriting. I give up. Do what you want. That I flipped it over. That a second message, different handwriting, mail. This isn't over. That I froze. That I checked the bathroom, the closet, nothing. Then lifted the toilet lid. Inside was a flash drive wrapped in plastic. Plugged into my laptop, it revealed a home video. Her and him. My voice, cut from an old recording, overlaid. A setup. That I smiled. They had begun to respond. They cared. And I'd crossed a line where forgiveness would never come. The next day, I went to her father's house. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. That I laid out the evidence. Photos, audio, documents. Either you disown her publicly, or I send everything to the tax office, the financial crimes unit, and social services. Who's her guardian then? I said, me. Until the court decides. Her father didn't get it at first. Then said, you're a monster. No, I told him I'm the antidote. Within 24 hours, she received a letter from him. Forget the inheritance. You're no longer my daughter. That evening, I dragged her old suitcase outside and left it by the front door. Inside, a phone without a SIM card, an old diary, printed texts from the lover, and one photo. Above it all, in thick black marker, you made your choice. I'm just finishing it. If you're still here tomorrow morning, it'll be my mercy. That I knew they'd try to run. I just didn't expect it to be so soon. Why morning? She was gone and no trace. No phone, no cards. The flat smelled of her perfume, deliberately left behind. She wanted me to feel emptiness. I felt something else. The scent of blood. A cup on the kitchen counter. Tea still warm. She'd left only moments before. Cameras showed no one entered through the front. She'd escaped via the back gate. I searched the yard. Found black hair caught on the latch. I drove to the pharmacy she always used. The CCTV showed her the night before, with a masked man carrying a bag. The guard had been fired from the shopping center but hadn't given up. I checked her last calls. An unknown number registered to an elderly woman in Sheffield but linked to a man living nearby who rented short-term flats. His battered car was in the parking lot. I grabbed an old crowbar from my glove box, not for show but to understand what came next. Up 4 flights. I pressed the buzzer once. He opened the door just a sliver. Enough that I shoulder-charged it shut behind me. He staggered back. She screamed and I moved like a butcher in a slaughterhouse. No words, no flare. He grabbed something. I hit his cheek. Then his stomach. He doubled over, gasping. I smashed his phone. She lunged at me. I pushed her back. A bag lay on the floor. Passports, tickets, cash. Ready to flee south. I raised a stool over my head. He backed off. Knowing the score, I leaned close. If you leave before a week, you'll be the local headline. His eyes darted. Like a trapped animal. I left slowly. Downstairs, into my car, I pulled out the divorce papers, signed, sealed, witnesses ready. Today, for 1:00 sharp. Emma still in her dressing gown. The middle step always hits hardest. At 4:45. The judge read out the verdict. Divorce granted. The flat went to her, but with debts she hid, loans signed by third parties. I opened all accounts. She was left with a concrete box held as collateral. Outside, the rain misted my face. I bought bread, milk, and a pack of cigarettes. Last time I smoked was 8 years ago. Today was a reason. That evening, she returned, silent, hunched, no bags. Probably too scared to collect her things. I waited by the window. On the table lay a flash drive with all their messages, entire files with timelines and photos. She stopped at the door, breathless. You gave me this for our anniversary. I said. I give you a new title, ex-wife. But the gift isn't over. By morning, I called the tax office. The car's gift contract was invalidated. She tried to backdate it. Her passport was flagged as suspicious. I filed requests to investigate all her deals over the last 2 years. My brother contacted the bank's tech team. She'd entered fake payments to hide card movements. Reports had gaps. Work launched an audit on day 3. A calm voice called me. Your girl's stirring up trouble, I said. Let her. She always pokes where it's slippery, he said. All clear. 2 hours later, news. Her lover was in a crash. Broken ribs and nose. Symbolic, nothing serious. That evening, she arrived. Wet hair, no umbrella, blue lips, barefoot on the mat. I said nothing. She whispered, why are you doing this to me? To make sure you never forget. That the pain wasn't for nothing. To show you were worth less than you thought. They thought it was over. That the pain had passed. The court decided. But I'd only drawn the weapon. True reckoning starts not in court, but when you destroy a person from the inside, millimeter by millimeter, without touching the skin. The next day, I went to the bank to transfer the insurance, checked the card. The clerk froze. There was a strange payment yesterday on your wife's card, to a charity. She printed the statement. £230,000, her last live money. That I knew it wasn't a charity. That it was a scheme to hide cash. Launder through a front. That I took the papers there, an industrial estate. A warehouse. That a man in his 40s, tracksuit and gold chain, sat at a desk. That I slammed the documents down. Who are you to her? Partner. That I struck his hand, knocking him from his chair. Now you're nobody. That I took his laptop, stamp, tablet, broke the mouse in half, drenched the papers in coffee. That day, I filed for annulment of the deal, fraud, money laundering, deliberate concealment of assets during divorce. The same judge. The decision froze the remaining funds. Money returned. She was left with nothing. Midpoint is where a person breaks. I shattered her publicly. I called her sister. Ask her why she transferred money to a charity registered under her lover's name. 2 hours later, a call with hysteria, crying, threats, accusations. That I stayed silent. Then said, you can't stop burning, Emma, because I keep adding coal every day. That evening, I found him in the mall car park, alone, hood up, hiding like a rat. I pulled up behind him, headlights blinding. That he turned away, shielding his face. That I stepped out, door open. He said, you're crazy. That I punched his stomach, then his ear. That he screamed. That no one came. That no one helped. 1 week to disappear. If I see you again, you won't close your eyes in time. He vanished. Next morning, he fled to another city, sold what he could. Accounts empty, debts remain. His name no longer appeared in databases, but I'd already marked him done. Now, it was her turn. I came home. She sat in the lounge, eyes hollow. A laptop opened in front of her showed a spreadsheet. Income, expenses, negative balance. I sat quietly beside her. On screen was her job application. Are you sure they'll take you? No answer, I said. I warned them. They know about the court, the documents, the fraud. They don't want an accountant with a dirty past. She cried. Not theatrically, quietly, with a ragged breath. I handed her a tissue. She didn't take it. I rose, went to the cupboard, pulled out a folder, photos. I placed them before her. Burn them. One condition. Comment on each aloud. Where, when, whose money. Or I'll make an album titled Betrayal, 2024 edition, and send it to your niece's wedding. Through tears and coughs. She started. I recorded every word, and oh mercy. No pity. Each word like a nail under a fingernail. That night, on the balcony, smoking, below, the bin. On it lay the suitcase where it all began. Someone had dragged it from the cellar. Empty. Only a note. Pain will return. I smiled. Alive. Remembering. Suffering. I sat at the table, took a pen, wrote one line for her. Tomorrow you're fired. Not because I said so, but because now you're nothing but dead weight. When a person stops fighting, they start rotting inside. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw a tantrum. Just Saturday, but her eyes weren't empty. They were filled with growing hatred. I felt it immediately. Next day, I left for work, just a day like any other, loads, shifts, forklifts. But in the evening, my mum called, voice tense. Emma had been at the door shaking, left a package and gone. I told her not to touch it. An hour later, I was there, inside. Photos of the kids, an old family album, and a scrap of paper. You've become worse than we feared. I clenched my fists. Nothing was destroyed, clear. She was turning to the children. Back home, the flat was empty. I went to the bedroom, opened a drawer. She'd been searching for a weakness. I lifted the pillow and no recorder. She understood. Everything she said could be used against her. She'd now act from the shadows. Sneaky as ever. That evening, I went to the local officer's office. Not to complain, just gave a list of numbers that called the kids. Point one was hers. Another was a former school employee. A third was a friend who moved away. A psychologist had planted the idea in the kids' heads. Their father was cruel, mother a victim. I drove to see her. An elderly woman opened the door, didn't recognize me. I stepped inside. Asked who I was. She called a friend. The friend appeared in a dressing gown, holding tea. Calm yourself, she smiled. You're very nervous. I said nothing. I showed the call logs, photos of her trips, screenshots where she said, if the kids find out, he'll break. I stood, walked to the door. Before leaving, you'll lose your license in a week. If you're lucky, you won't get punched. Back with the children, I was calm. No outbursts. I showed the photo of their mother with another man in my jacket. I asked, this okay? They were silent. I said, your choice. But I won't abandon you. Even if she screams she's hurting, I'm here. They nodded, silent. Silence says more than words. I knew the crack had formed. She wouldn't get away with this. That night, she came with keys. Entered like nothing had happened. I waited in the kitchen. You've crossed the line. Not through the kids. Now I'm not just taking revenge. I'm tearing you down. She whispered, you're not human. I smirked. You made this yourself. I'm just the one recording it. Next morning, I went to a private clinic for a psychiatric assessment. Not for her, for me, for the paperwork that they'd write. Psychologically stable, no threat to others. Competent. Needed for court, so no one said he's crazy with grief. No. I was precise. Cold. I filed a motion to limit her contact with the kids, based on manipulation attempts, emotional abuse. I had all the evidence. Calls, texts, videos, screenshots, court set for 10 days later. She didn't know that I prepared the final blow. Her income declaration through a tax contact. Lots surfaced, unpaid bonuses, hidden deals, fake loans. Filed with financial crime police. She'd be summoned. Not tomorrow, but in 3 days. But she sensed it. Next morning, she knocked. I didn't open. She shouted, talk to me. I stood silently behind the door. Then left a note. Every step you take is a new nail, and I'm already holding the hammer. She wanted pity. I made sure even those who knew her since childhood turned away. He tried to disappear. I dragged him back into the spotlight. Every mistake, every moment captured on tape, and no one could unsee that. The end isn't forgiveness. The end is the period I placed. At 8:45 sharp. She arrived at court. Hoping for a postponement that I wouldn't show. But I was there. 2 witnesses at my side. A recorder and a thick folder. I filed the request to restrict her access to the kids. On grounds of moral pressure, distorted facts, hidden agitation against their father. The judge read slowly. She trembled. Biting her nails, I didn't look at her. I looked at the transcript. Her handwritten notes, screenshots from her phone showing plans to restore justice with friends' advice. At that moment, she knew I'd gone deeper than she imagined. The judge ruled in my favor. The children would stay with me until adulthood. She could see them once a month, with a psychologist present. No public comments about the family allowed, or full custody lost. She didn't cry. Sat like her soul was ripped away. I left first. Outside, a tax official waited, handed me a copy of the ruling. Her case was under investigation. Declarations, transactions, card movements scrutinized. I asked if work had started. He nodded. Accounting had a document seizure underway. I walked the street, past people, numb. Not from tiredness, but the speed and certainty that everything I planned was unfolding. Strict, cold, flawless. At a tea lunch, the officer called. A man with injuries was found outside their rented flat. Broken arm, split lip. He tried to run with leftover money but was caught by debt collectors. Debts stick tight. I'd only directed the wind. He did the rest. I arrived at the scene. A grimy street, dirty snow, blood on the steps. He sat against a wall. Vacant eyes. I didn't approach. Just stood, took a side photo to show injuries, dirty jacket. Then left. Printed the photo, took it to her. Her face looked like someone burned twice. I silently placed the photo on the table. Now you're on the same level. Only the ground is lower. That evening, local news. A story about a former mall security guard trying to cash stolen funds with fake papers. Photos blurred, but I recognized him, her hero, her friend. His face was blacked out, but his chin shape was unmistakable. The end had come. The next day, a note arrived, no envelope, her handwriting. I can't live like this. You destroyed everything I had. Only fear remains. No apology, no plea. Only fear. That meant I was right. It had reached her. I didn't reply. Burned the note. Ash stuck to the wet sink like a last complaint from a loser. The next morning, I woke at 5, like old times. No reason why body remembered being needed. I made coffee. Opened the window. Silence. Clean. Toys left on the left side of the room. Our old photos on the fridge. I hadn't taken them down. Not out of sadness, but memory. Memory that if you stay silent, you get trampled. If you act, better go all the way. I sat at the table, took a pen, and wrote a short note to the kids. You've grown up. Not all at once, but you have. Remember one thing. If you're betrayed, don't scream. Take a step, then another, then finish calmly, until the end. The words felt heavy as I wrote them down, like a final testament to everything that had unfolded. I wasn't sure if they'd understand now, or if it would all make sense until years later when the weight of betrayal and the sting of loss settled deep inside them. But I hoped they'd remember, to not let anyone walk over them, to fight back quietly but relentlessly. That night, the house was eerily still. The silence was different now. Not the kind that feels empty, but one that hums with tension. I caught myself glancing at the door, half expecting her to walk back in, to break the fragile peace with an apology or a scream. But she didn't come, and I wasn't sure if I wanted her to. I found myself pacing, replaying every moment. The shock of seeing him in my dressing gown, the humiliating punches that never quite landed, the way Emma had tried to justify the betrayal as just a friend, the absurdity of my own revenge plans, the drilling through the walls at dawn, the endless bureaucracy, the cold legal battles that felt like chess moves in a game I never wanted to play. I remembered the look in her eyes the day she came home after the hospital. The way she sat, defeated yet burning with silent rage. I had thought I was the one breaking, but maybe she was too. Or maybe we both were, in different ways, trapped in this mess we'd created. The flash drives, the secret recordings, the photos I forced her to narrate out loud. All ridiculous and cruel. Yet, in that moment, I convinced myself it was justice. But deep down, I knew it was just pain masquerading as revenge. I sat back down at the kitchen table, the pen still in my hand. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the first soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains. I breathed deeply, feeling the exhaustion settle in. The war was far from over, and the scars, visible and invisible, would linger long after the courtrooms and threats faded. I glanced toward the living room where the kids' toys lay scattered, innocent reminders of what we once had. I whispered to myself, more a promise than a prayer. I'll protect them, no matter what. And with that, I finally felt a flicker of something I hadn't in days, hope. Not for us, not for her, but for the chance to rebuild something better. For them. Because in the end, that's all that mattered. Days blurred into one another, each carrying the weight of cold calculations and quiet despair. I found myself moving through the motions. Work, court visits, meetings with lawyers. Like a ghost tethered to a life unraveling at the seams. The house felt emptier with every passing hour. The echoes of laughter and arguments replaced by the sterile hum of loneliness. One evening, as I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, my phone buzzed. A message from Emma. Simple. Can we talk? My heart clenched for a moment, then hardened. After everything, after the lies and the public humiliation, what was left to say? I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at the screen, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on me. I thought about the man who had been so brazen in my home, the twisted revenge that made me look just as desperate, the court battles that drained us both. I thought about the kids caught in the crossfire, forced to choose sides in a war they never asked for. I realized then that revenge was a hollow victory. It didn't erase the betrayal or the shame. It just carved deeper wounds, ones that might never heal. Late that night, I found myself walking the empty streets near our home, the cold air biting at my skin. The world moved on around me. Couples laughing, neighbors chatting. While I stood still, caught in the aftermath of a life shattered, I thought about forgiveness. Not for her, not yet, but for myself. To let go of the bitterness that was slowly poisoning me. To find a way back to some semblance of peace. Maybe one day, the scars would fade. Maybe one day we'd all find a way to move past this. But for now, all I could do was keep going. Step by step, day by day. Because no matter how broken things got, the kids deserved that much. And maybe, just maybe, so did I. The following morning, I found myself standing at the school gates, watching my son and daughter disappear into the crowd of students. Their faces were guarded, shadows of the innocence that once lit up their eyes. I wondered how much they truly understood, how much of the tangled mess between Emma and me had seeped into their world. I wanted to shield them, but the cracks were undeniable. Back at the house, the silence was thick. The rooms felt colder, less like a home and more like a battleground left behind. I wandered from room to room, pausing at the places where memories clung stubbornly. The faded wallpaper in the kitchen, the worn armchair by the window, the scattered toys that still waited for attention. It was all a reminder of what had been and what might never be again. The legal battles dragged on, each court date a fresh wound reopened. Emma's attempts to regain control were as desperate as mine, and the bitterness between us grew with every exchange. I caught myself sometimes wishing it could end differently, that we could find a way to coexist without tearing each other apart. But pride, pain, and betrayal had locked us in a war neither of us wanted to lose. One afternoon, as I sat going through paperwork, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from my brother. "Can you come by? Need to talk." I hesitated but agreed. When I arrived, he met me with a weary look. "James, you've been carrying this alone for too long. You don't have to." His words hit harder than any punch. For so long, I'd been wrapped up in anger and revenge, forgetting that I wasn't alone. There were people who still cared, who wanted to help me find a way out of the darkness. That evening, I called Emma, not to argue or accuse but to ask about the kids, to see if we could start putting their needs before our pain. The line was silent for a long moment before she spoke, voice fragile. "Maybe we should try." It wasn't a promise or a reconciliation, just a tentative step toward something neither of us could yet name. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for us, but for the family we still were, in some broken, imperfect way. The road ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges. There would be setbacks, anger, and sorrow. But maybe, just maybe, it was possible to rebuild from the ruins, not by forgetting the past but by learning to live beyond it. And that was a beginning. Weeks passed, and the tentative truce between Emma and me settled into a fragile rhythm. We began coordinating school runs and doctor's appointments, our conversations clipped but civil. It was awkward, like two strangers forced to share a space neither wanted. But beneath the surface, I sensed a shared understanding. The kids came first. Always. One rainy afternoon, I found myself sitting in a cafe near the school, watching Emma through the window. She was alone, nursing a cup of tea, her fingers wrapped tightly around it as if seeking warmth beyond the steam. Her hair, once always perfect, now fell untidily around her face. A flicker of the woman I once loved, lost beneath layers of pain and regret. I debated going over, saying something, anything, to break the distance. But I stayed put, choosing instead to let the moment be. Sometimes, silence spoke louder than words. Later that evening, when the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, the folder of legal documents still open but forgotten. I thought about how far we'd fallen and how much farther we might have to go. The anger that had consumed me for so long was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was no longer the driving force. That I realized that healing wouldn't come from revenge or bitterness. It would come from acceptance and, maybe, forgiveness. Not just of her, but of myself. The path ahead was uncertain, and the scars would remain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't in months, a cautious hope that one day, the pieces might fit together again. Not as they were, but in a new, fragile form. Because sometimes, the hardest battles aren't won with fists or fury, but with patience and the courage to let go.